the voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
All right, it's Thursday, January the 8th. We're back in the Big Apple. Common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is here. The show brought to you by Ease Total Health. Health insurance is broken. Ease fixes it with no deductibles, no restrictions on doctors or hospitals. It's benefits that you can use on day one. If you're having trouble with your private insurance, this might be the answer. Visit easeforeveryone.com/Scott to learn more. Ease Total Health, EASE. We begin the news today with a fallout from the Minneapolis shooting, where an ICE agent shot and killed a woman who was apparently involved, according to eyewitnesses, in some sort of a convoy of vehicles that had been interfering with ICE operations in the city. The deceased is 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good. Video shows her hitting an ICE agent with her car after disobeying orders to stop and exit her vehicle. The narratives and the gaslighting about what happened are out of control on the American left and in the American media. Last night on CNN, I debated the issues. Here's what I had to say. Okay, we don't have the clip of what I did on CNN last night, but I'll tell you what I said. Here's what I think. I don't understand why people have decided that it's okay to get in a vehicle, a convoy of vehicles, and drive into an active law enforcement situation. It seems to me that we have an epidemic of political vigilantism going on in the United States of America. People who have come to believe that it is their responsibility to take matters into their own hands. Why do they believe this? Because it's what they have been told to do by their political leadership. It's absolutely true. Democrats have been radicalizing their supporters all year long. I'm sad to say, it seems, in the hopes that something like this would happen. I hate to say this because I hate to believe that people in positions of political and public trust would hope for this, but what else am I supposed to conclude? Take a listen to the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan. Okay, we're having some issues with our clipping service today. Here's what Peggy Flanagan told people in Minnesota earlier this year. She said, put your body on the line. She had a clip of herself in an interview instructing people to, quote, put your body on the line in order to stop ICE agents. Why is she doing this? Because she disagrees with U.S. immigration law. That's a perfectly fine political position to have. You can disagree with the laws regarding immigration or anything else. But what is not okay is to tell people that, hey, because we disagree with the laws, we need to take matters into our own hands, like political vigilantes, and stop the people who are sworn to uphold the laws from doing so. That's what they are doing with these vehicle convoys. They're telling people, go to these law enforcement zones, go to these law enforcement situations, and impede and obstruct. There are eyewitnesses on the ground who say these cars were there to impede and obstruct ICE agents in carrying out their sworn duties. Put your body on the line. That's what Renee Good did yesterday, and now she's dead. Democrats like Peggy Flanagan, in my opinion, have blood on their hands today. So does Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who spent the last year calling ICE agents the Gestapo. What do you expect? You call ICE agents Gestapo, you tell people to sacrifice themselves to stop the Gestapo? Well, someone might take you up on it. There have been over 100 incidents nationwide of ICE agents being rammed by protesters in cars. Cars, by the way, are considered deadly weapons. In fact, the agent involved in yesterday's shooting was himself dragged by a protester's car at another location last summer. That man had been in that situation before. Frankly, it's a miracle that he is still alive. Also bothering me today is that the people who run Minnesota, Walz, the Minneapolis mayor and honorary Somali pirate Jacob Fry, the aforementioned Flanagan, and the senator Tina Smith, well, they've all made demands that federal agents leave Minnesota, as though the state of Minnesota should exist outside the bounds of federal law. In other words, they appear to be seceding from the union. Let's take a listen to those folks.
And I have a message for ICE. To ICE, get the out of Minneapolis.
And from here on, I have a very simple message. We do not need any further help from the federal government.
So what you are hearing from Minnesotans, and I will say this myself loud and clear, ICE, it is time to get out of Minnesota and to go home. You are making all of us less safe and putting us in danger.
Well, I wish I knew. I wish they would just leave us. Seriously.
I hate to tell you this, but the people who run Minnesota, those Democrats, are at least rhetorically trying to secede from the union. They are encouraging American citizens to engage in open warfare with federal agents, who, by the way, are doing nothing more than enforcing existing immigration law. We haven't passed any new law since Trump became the president. He's simply enforcing the laws that were already on the books. Here's Governor Tim Walz saying he will send the National Guard to fight against federal ICE agents.
To tell you, and I don't quite know how to respond to the question other than my primary responsibility as governor is the protection of the people of Minnesota. And you can be assured whether it's the State Patrol or whether it's the National Guard, their deployment is there to protect Minnesotans from whatever it is. If it's an act of nature, if it's a global pandemic, or in this case, if it is a rogue federal agent. I don't know at this time, and I want to be very careful.
The governor of a state threatening to send the National Guard to fight against federal law enforcement officers? If you thought Tim Walz was in over his head before, look out now. What he's proposing is downright dangerous. And as you might expect, Walz and his band of secessionists got support last night from the nation's foremost liar and propagandist, ABC's Jimmy Kimmel.
I know what they're doing. They're trying out a new slogan. Donald J. Trump is going to kill you. It's pretty good. To ICE. Get the out of Minneapolis. Get the out of all of these cities.
There are people in this country, the radical left, radicalizing their political base. There are Democratic officials who are functionally trying to secede from the union by arguing that because Donald Trump is the president, they should not be subject to federal laws, specifically federal immigration laws. And now a woman is dead because of it. And you have these irresponsible voices in the national media egging this on, creating lunacy and instability on the streets of America. If you want to change the laws, that's perfectly fine. If you don't like immigration laws, that is your right to dislike them. It is even your right to protest them. It is not your right to drive a car into an active federal law enforcement situation for the purpose of disrupting duly sworn agents and cops from doing their job. In fact, it's a felony to do so. If you didn't like how much the IRS was charging you in taxes, you wouldn't drive your car into the lobby of the Treasury Department and try to run someone over. You'd call your congressman and say, I don't know, something like, change the laws, make the tax rates lower. But in this case, Democrats, because Trump is the president, have said, we're all now responsible to become political vigilantes. And now you see the results. Coming up, Dustin Grage, our friend on the ground in Minneapolis, joins us for a live report. It's common sense for the American people. Stay with us. All right, it's Thursday, January the 8th, live from New York City today. Scott Jennings here, Common Sense for the American People. Joining the show, Grage the Sage. My friend Dustin Grage on the ground in Minnesota, one of the most connected guys in Minnesota and Minneapolis politics. Dustin, welcome back to the show. You were with us the other day. We were talking about Somalian fraud. Today we're talking about this, that's still going on. We don't have time to get into all that today, but they were doing a big hearing on that up at Capitol Hill. I kind of want to focus on what's going on the ground in Minneapolis. We had the shooting, and I think we've had a bunch of irresponsible rhetoric from Democrats. What are you hearing from your people? And waking up in Minneapolis today, what's the story?
Yeah, so right now, I mean, personally, I'm avoiding the area. My face is just too recognizable for some of these spots. But we do have some investigative journalists working directly with me right now. They are on the ground, and they were also there in 2020. So they're very familiar with what was happening then. And right now, Scott, we are seeing the same exact playbook play out with what we saw with George Floyd. It's these clips going around. It's the rhetoric going around. But it's just a little bit smaller scale. It's about a seventh of the size. We just have hundreds of protesters versus thousands of protesters. But it's the same exact playbook. Right now, they've actually already shut down the street in which the incident occurred. And they're setting up an autonomous zone right now with the DSA and the Antifa activist cells out here. And yeah, we're going to see a lot of the same results. I mean, once those lights go down, it'll be a completely different story. But right now, there are hundreds of activists right now making a way toward these ICE facilities. They are screaming obscenities at these ICE agents, and they are threatening their lives, saying, we're going to go find your address, put you in a public database, and murder you. I mean, it's a very serious threat happening right now to a smaller scale, but the playbook's there still the same.
In your opinion, how many of these protesters who are now blocking streets and threatening ICE agents and so on are actually from Minnesota, and how many of them are coming in from out of state?
That's a very good question. And right now, I do think most of them are Minnesotans. But as this story just starts to develop, I mean, I've had investigative journalists from out of state I've been working with have been coming in, like Nick Sorter and so on and so forth. We've been working on stuff together. But now it's just going to expand from there. Now, this individual who did unfortunately die in this incident, she was previously from Missouri and originally from Colorado Springs. So she moved from there to Missouri and now very, very recently to Minnesota. How long she's been here, we don't quite know yet. But a lot of this is new developing. And because of these incidents occurring, people are going to now rebrand this, not the Summer of Love of 2020, but it's now going to potentially become the Winter of Love.
One of the characters in this whole Minnesota political situation I'm most interested in is this Peggy Flanagan, the lieutenant governor. She seems like a complete and total lunatic to me. I see her one day wearing Muslim garb in front of the Somalis. I see her one day promoting, I guess, violence for transgender people to commit violence against others. I see her wearing a shirt promoting that. I see videos of her saying, put your bodies on the line, instructing her supporters to go out and effectively sacrifice themselves to stop federal law enforcement. What is the deal with Flanagan? How did she come to power? And is this somebody with ambition? Is she going to be a serious player moving forward, or was this a fluke that some lunatic like this became the lieutenant governor of Minnesota?
No, it's no fluke. And so what Peggy Flanagan's history here is she's a disciple of Paul Wellstone. Many are familiar with the late senator who passed in the plane crash. That is the individual who ultimately set the grassroots movement here in Minnesota. And she, at a very young age, was brought into that movement and now has gone from a state representative to the lieutenant governor. And now, Scott, I am hearing directly from sources at the Senate and other entities that she is now polling number one in this race for U.S. Senate for the nomination for the Democrat Party right now. A lot of people called me crazy when I said this would happen, but there's a reason she was added to Walz's ticket when he ran for governor, because he simply didn't have enough support in their caucus. But by adding Peggy Flanagan, it brought this coalition of support from these far lefties to, at the time, Walz was considered a moderate. And that marriage together has created now the Walz-Flanagan ticket that has created just absolute chaos on the state. But yeah, she has a future in this party, but thankfully she is polling not that well against the generic Republicans. So if we nominate a good Republican here, we have a very good chance of beating her.
That voice you're hearing, Dustin Grage, one of the most connected guys on the ground in Minneapolis. Dustin, thanks for checking in with us. We'll come back to you on the I want to get back to the Somali fraud story at some point, but we'll keep up with you as this ICE situation unfolds as well. We're going to take a break. When we come back, one of the most connected pollsters in America, Brent Buchanan from Signal, is going to join us. He's got a book coming out. We'll talk about the latest polling on political affairs in America. Common sense for the American people. Stay with us.
You've heard the narratives. Now get the truth. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Welcome back. Thursday, January the 8th. Common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings with you here on Salem. Great guest coming up, Brent Buchanan, who is the CEO of Signal, a major polling and analytics firm. He's got an interesting book out that we're going to talk about. First, a quick word from our friends and our partners at Child Help. Child Help runs the National Child Abuse Hotline, and they take in thousands of calls from kids like Carrie, who was 13 years old, when she called up and said to the counselor, I no longer want to live. Not live at home, live, period. She was dealing with an abusive mother. She was feeling isolated and hopeless. And through the tears, she told the Child Help counselor, I want to die. The counselor spoke to her gently, reminded her that she mattered and that her life had meaning. They created a safety plan. They created ways to cope. They created trust between them. Carrie's still alive. Had she not made that call, she might well have committed suicide. But she did make the call, and by the end, she had hope. She had resources. She had someone who was with her in her darkest moment. Because of this story and thousands of others, I, Scott Jennings, am proudly partnering with Child Help to support this mission of stamping out child abuse in the United States. I want you to join me. I'm directly asking you to join me, and I wouldn't ask you to do something I haven't done myself. I am a personal donor to Child Help. A donation of $27 helps save a child from abuse. All you have to do is text the word Child Help, all one word, to this number, 94878. $27 saves a child like Carrie. $135 would ensure that 5 children have someone to turn to when they need it the most. You can make a difference. Text Child Help to 94878, or the old-fashioned way, call them up, 1-833-302-HELP, 1-833-302-4357. Scott Jennings here on Salem. Common sense for the American people. My next guest, Brent Buchanan, old friend of mine, pollster and CEO of Signal, which is a polling and analytics firm. Brent, welcome to the show. And I want to hear about your book. You had a book that came out in December called America's Emotional Divide. And I want to know why you wrote the book, what you found in the book, and what it says about 2026. So welcome into the Scott Jennings Show.
Hey, great to be here, and congrats on the success of the show on Salem. So the book here I wrote right after the 2024 election because it really, to me, that election showed us the divide that we have within this country. And I wanted to explore, why do we have that divide? What's driving that divide? And then how do we move past it? Or how do we, at least on the right, how do we win in spite of this divide? And so began doing academic research. We did a huge survey after the election, diving into people who voted, those who Trump had taken over from the Democrats to vote for him, those who showed up to vote for the first time, the few folks who came off of Trump and went to Kamala Harris for some unknown reason, to really understand what is driving, what is happening in our country right now. How can we understand it? And then how can we pivot that towards the good?
So, I want to talk about that in a minute. First, look, you and I have worked together on some things in the past. I trust your insights. I am frequently told by people on CNN and in other venues that every time Donald Trump does something, the MAGA base or the Republican Party is splitting from Donald Trump. Most recently, I heard this about Venezuela. Based on your review of the current polling and the data that you've seen, is that true today? Has it ever been true? Is Donald Trump in danger of losing his base over Venezuela or any other decision that he's making right now?
What's really interesting about the coalition that elected Donald Trump is they are super tuned out from the news. So yes, the Republican base as a whole, the folks who voted Republican for their whole life, that watch the news all the time, yeah, they might have some varying opinions, but they're not going anywhere. But it's this group of younger, more diverse, kind of ticked off working class folks that put Donald Trump in the White House. And those people are not paying attention to the news. They're also not paying attention to the midterms, which is a more of concern to me, is how do you get those people re-engaged and turned out? But the narrative that the mainstream media tries to push, that somehow when Donald Trump takes these bold actions in either within the U.S. or outside its borders, that it's somehow fracturing the base. And I have not seen his numbers move an iota from his Republican base.
Yeah, what you often find in the venues in which I operate, they'll roll out sort of an anecdote. Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene is mad about this, or Thomas Massey is mad about that, and they use those as stand-ins for actual data. I'm with you. I've never seen any data at all that indicates Trump is in trouble with Republicans. I agree with you about maybe independent. Well, tell me about independents. People who don't consider themselves strongly partisan. Maybe some of them are kind of the voters you were just describing, not terribly political, maybe not following the news. Maybe some of them are just, politically homeless. Is he losing ground with what you as a campaign pollster would refer to as an independent?
Independents are a fickle bunch, and it's because the majority of independents are actually veiled partisans. If you tore their shirt open, you would see a red or a blue jersey on the bulk of independents. They just pretend like they are not on one side or the other. And it's this other group that put Trump in the White House that just decides to show up or not. And they're not ideological. They're not partisan. They really are looking out for, am I going to be able to make groceries later this week? Can I make the rent payment at the beginning of the next month? Those are the things that they're concerned about. Their view of the future is much closer than pretty much anybody else. Like when you say, look down the road, what do you see in your future? They're thinking next month. And so they're living very hand to mouth. And so this group, I'm not worried about them right now for Donald Trump, because they didn't tune into the presidential election until a couple months out. They're not going to tune into this midterm until a few weeks out. I was talking with a journalist at a mainstream paper this morning, and they were asking why is Trump not fully focused on affordability? And I said, because there's a whole lot of other problems that have to be solved. And now is the time to solve them, when the people who matter in deciding the election are totally tuned out. And so you get all these things out of the way now, and then you laser focus on affordability in the fall.
Let me ask you about this issue of affordability. I hear Democrats out there saying things like, well, Donald Trump promised he was going to reduce all prices on day one, and that hasn't happened. He's a failed president. Do you think voters had an expectation that Donald Trump could assume control of the country and within the first 24 hours sign a magic document that would, reset all prices back to, say, 2017 or 2018? Or are people smarter than Democrats give them credit for?
People are smarter than Democrats, and they're smarter than Democrats give them credit for. Both can be true. But what this really is about is, are the people in charge concerned about and thinking about the things that I'm thinking about as a voter? So the voters are not looking for everything to be solved tomorrow or next month, but they want to know that Trump and those in charge are as worried about the things that they're worried about, and they will give them grace if they feel understood. And that's a lot of what I go into in the book, is that it's the responsibility of leaders and politicians and candidates to create the connection with voters, that voter says, that guy, that gal understands somebody like me. Not I agree with him on every policy point, not we're totally aligned ideologically. Does that person get me? Because think about this. Donald Trump is the blue-collar billionaire, and he is some would say, loudmouth guy from New York City real estate dude who made 77 million Americans say, that guy gets somebody like me. That is the power of Donald Trump, but he has a lot of problems to deal with right now, and it's hard for him to, because of the number of issues that have to be tackled, to focus as much on making people feel on this economic concern that he understands people like them every single day.
That voice you're hearing today on the Scott Jennings Show, Brent Buchanan. He's a pollster and CEO of a company called Signal. It's a polling and analytics firm. He's talking about his new book, America's Emotional Divide. We spent a lot of time in punditry, Brent, analyzing the economic data. There's some economic data that came out today that was pretty good, for the White House perspective. We talk about that stuff a lot. We talk about the macro data and so on and so forth. But in your book, you actually argue that some of this is less important than just what you were discussing a moment ago, the need for politicians to create an emotional connection with voters, particularly with voters who aren't all that tuned in and who don't show up all that often. Trump obviously did that with a cohort of people who show up for him, but as we found out in 24, they will oftentimes, leave the ballot blank in other races, or when he's not on the ballot, not show up at all. I mean, I assume from your perspective, this is priority 1, 2, and 3 for the tactical side of the Republican Party. How do you get people to have the same kind of an emotional connection with other Republicans that they somehow form with Donald Trump?
Yeah, it's a challenge that requires a lot of intention in thinking about how am I going to make somebody feel when I talk about this. Not just what are they hearing, but how are they feeling when they hear this. And I don't mean get all touchy-feely. My family would tell you I'm not a super emotional guy, but this is how we are biologically wired. It is how humanity works together to understand each other, to form bonds. And all of these emotional things actually create chemical reactions in the brain. And so when somebody like Donald Trump is creating this connection with somebody, it is a literal chemical connection that he's creating with these folks. And that's why he got 77 million votes in the last election. And so what Republicans have to do is realize that this is not a policy or politics game. This is a relational, emotional game, and you've got to make people feel understood. And if they would focus on that piece as opposed to playing the game, they would realize it's really not that hard, but it does take discipline.
So, final question for you. We got about 30 seconds. I hear Democrats right now. I see Democrats, Walz, Fry in Minnesota. I see some of them in Washington. They're cursing all the time. They're dropping F-bombs like crazy. And, you know, we've been playing it on CNN. I question the wisdom of that. I think we ought to beep it out, frankly. Are they doing that to try to create emotional links to people? Do things like that work? It sounds crazy and stupid to me, and it sounds extremely forced and inauthentic. But is that what they're trying to do? They think they can create emotional bonds by cursing all the time?
Correct. Anger is the number one motivator for action, whether that's political action or anything else. So if they can make their audience of this, you know, the Trump deranged voter, feel that they are as angry about everything Trump is doing as that voter is, they feel that they can create that connection and turn that person out. I think the challenge is for them that they're only speaking to their base when they do that, because their base is already angry. Those folks are going to show up regardless of whether they drop the F-bomb or talk about Donald Trump anyways. And I feel that it's going to, like you said, come across inauthentically when those lower propensity voters decide to tune in 3 to 6 weeks out from the midterm.
Yeah, it's fan service is all it is. I don't think they're doing anything for themselves. It's fan service. That's Brent Buchanan, pollster and CEO of Signal. It's a polling and analytics firm, and I guess you're now a chemist talking about brain chemicals there, Brent. Thanks for coming on the show today. Get his book. It's called America's Emotional Divide. If you want to understand American politics, I recommend you get it and read it and follow Brent Buchanan and the boys over at Signal. We're going to take a break. First, a quick word from our friends at Done With Debt. If you are stressed out about getting out of debt, it's go time. Listen to this. The Fed's latest survey showing that many banks have already tightened their standards. That means that right now, your best window to negotiate a settlement is now, before the lenders tighten up even further. Done With Debt is one of the best companies I've seen at navigating debt relief. In 2025, they enrolled over $100 million in debt for our listeners, people like you. Done With Debt tracks all these things. They know when to move, how to move, and how far you can go. They know what it takes to get you out of debt. So my recommendation is you'll get the biggest reduction possible if you talk to Done With Debt. It helps you through the debt relief process so you can keep more of your paycheck every month. Done With Debt. Done With Debt. Check them out. And you can do it without taking out another loan or filing for bankruptcy. More when we come back. It's Scott on Salem. And welcome back to the Scott Jennings Show here on Salem. I want to close out the first hour today talking about Greenland. Everybody is freaking out about Greenland. Look, when Donald Trump revived the idea that Greenland should become part of the United States, predictable snickering followed. But beneath the late-night jokes lies a serious argument rooted in history, geography, and national security. Here's the simple truth. The United States has both precedent and logic on its side when it comes to acquiring Greenland. Now, critics insist this is some newfangled Trump aberration. It is not. For more than 150 years, American leaders have recognized Greenland's strategic importance, not as a whimsical real estate fantasy, but as a vital asset for national defense and global influence. Let's get one thing straight. This is not about invading Greenland. That's ridiculous. This is not colonial conquest. This is about acquisition by consent, a negotiated transfer of sovereignty, something, frankly, that the United States has done peacefully before through purchase or treaty. Despite hysterical cable news commentary, this deal would not be made on a battlefield, but rather at a table. Long before Trump, U.S. presidents and secretaries of state understood Greenland's strategic value. In 1867, Secretary of State William Seward explored acquiring Greenland alongside Alaska and Iceland. He recognized its geographic promise long ago. He did get Alaska, but Greenland would have to wait. After World War II, the idea came back, this time with urgency. In 1946, President Harry Truman formally offered Denmark $100 million in gold to buy Greenland. This was not symbolic or speculative. It was a serious proposal designed to secure America's northern flank at the outset of the Cold War. Denmark declined the offer, but granted the United States critical defense rights that remain in place today. In fact, the United States operates the Pitifik Space Base in northern Greenland, a cornerstone of early warning systems and space surveillance. That fact alone underscores Greenland's enduring military value. History proves two things. Greenland matters, and America's interest in it is nothing new. There is also a reasonable argument to be made here that Denmark has not been the strongest steward of the island, and that the United States could offer greater economic opportunity and security for the small population that lives there. Donald Trump simply said out loud, as he often does, what others have always acknowledged quietly. We need Greenland, the president says, from the standpoint of national security. He also made clear that Denmark is not equipped to defend it adequately. This is not in question. They really aren't. Secretary of State Marco Rubio reinforced this point, dismissing the idea that Trump was joking. Secretary of State Rubio says this is not a joke. This is in our national interest, and it needs to be solved. The geography here is undeniable. Greenland sits astride the shortest trans-Arctic route between North America and Eurasia. As melting ice opens new shipping lanes and exposes rare earth resources, Chinese and Russian influence is growing. No serious global strategist could ignore this reality. Greenland is, in effect, a massive forward operating base, a strategic choke point that could determine who controls the Arctic's future. Critics invoke the word sovereignty as if this would end the debate. It does not. This is about offering a mutually beneficial path forward, one that strengthens Greenland economically while deepening Western security. Respect for self-determination matters, but serious negotiation among allies is not unprecedented. The Louisiana Purchase and the Alaska deal were both ridiculed in their time, but history proved otherwise. These were highly successful ideas for the United States. What truly unsettles Trump's critics is not the substance of the idea, it's the willingness to break taboos. Elites like to pretend that geography no longer matters. Greenland proves exactly the opposite. In an era of renewed great power competition, with Russia and China pressing into the Arctic, the United States should not blink. Offering a serious deal for Greenland is not reckless, it's just strategic common sense. The jokes obscure a sober truth. A strong America with a secure North Atlantic flank is good for the West. History, from Seward to Truman and now to Trump, shows Greenland has never been a punchline. It's always been a prize. That's it for the first hour. Coming up at the top of the hour, Steve Scalise, House Majority Floor Leader down in Washington, D.C., is our special guest. You're listening to Common Sense for the American People. We'll get all the latest from Washington, all the latest news coming up right here on Salem. Stay with us.
The voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Okay, it's Thursday, January the 8th. Common Sense for the American people. Scott Jennings here on Salem. We are hoping to hear from the U.S. House Majority Floor Leader, Steve Scalise, in a little while. I know he's got some stuff going on in the House. We were hoping to have him here at the top of the show, but we're getting him in from the hallway. So we're going to wait for Steve Scalise. I'm going to start back on Minnesota, though, while we get Congressman Scalise. It's just, this story is crazy. And the gaslighting and the narratives coming out of the left, coming out of the media is crazy. I thought you might enjoy seeing and hearing what I had to say to Abby Phillip on CNN last night. Let's play cut number 3, my monologue on the 10 o'clock show.
What strikes me is, first of all, it's extremely sad and unfortunate that someone died. I mean, the political fighting and disagreements aside, it's terrible. You don't want people to die in law enforcement situations or otherwise. But it strikes me that we are undergoing an epidemic of political vigilantism right now. Why are people showing up in vehicles, in convoys, not just in Minneapolis, but all over the country in an effort to obstruct lawful federal law enforcement activities? This is not an isolated incident. We have had hundreds of car rammings against ICE agents all over the country. According to DHS, this lady in this car today, along with other vehicles, had been tracking ICE agents around. Why are people believing that they can drive their car into a federal law enforcement situation and that is an appropriate thing to do? I understand they don't like the fact that these agents are enforcing existing immigration law, but that's not how we change laws in this country. If you don't like a law, you talk to the politicians. You don't drive your car into the middle of a building or a law enforcement situation that's being occupied by the people who are simply there to enforce the law. If I don't like how much the IRS is charging me in taxes, I don't drive my car into the Treasury Department and try to run somebody over. I call my congressman. Political vigilantism is being encouraged by Democratic officials like the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan, who earlier this year told people to, quote, put your bodies on the line, and Tim Walz calling these guys Gestapo all year. What do you think happens when you radicalize a base of people about this?
I was worked up last night, and I want to ask our next guest about it. Steve Scalise, the Majority Floor Leader of the United States House of Representatives from the great state of Louisiana. Congressman Scalise, are you there? I think we have him on the phone here. I assume you've been watching the news and reacting to this stuff going on in Minneapolis. What's on your mind about it today, sir?
Yeah, Scott, a lot. And, one is, you don't want to see anybody injured, but this started when the crazy lunatics on the left decided they were going to start targeting ICE agents. And this has been going on for months and months. I mean, we're seeing attacks against ICE agents up over 1,000%. These are people going after law enforcement, and many of them are being encouraged by left-wing politicians. You see Tim Walz, you talked about what he said about just trying to compare our law enforcement officers to Gestapo. This has to stop. They are inflaming this kind of left-wing violence against law enforcement. First, they tried to defund the police. Now they're going after them. I mean, look, we're going to get the facts, and there's going to be an investigation. But we know for a fact that time and time again, we've seen people attacking ICE officers for doing their job. They're trying to secure America's border and our interior from criminals. We've had American citizens murdered by people here illegally. How many times do you have to see it? We passed laws, the Lake and Riley Act, other bills, because of the murders that have happened, and yet there are citizens today that are going and attacking law enforcement for doing their jobs, carrying out the laws of this land.
Yeah, what sort of strikes me as weird about all this is that we haven't passed any new immigration laws since Donald Trump became the president. These laws have been on the books for a long time. And Democrats, instead of trying to change the laws, I guess because they can't, because we're in the majority, they lost the election, they've just decided to become political vigilantes. Well, we're not going to change the laws. We're just going to try to prevent laws from being enforced. Is this the first time in your political career you've seen anything like this, where people are essentially taking matters into their own hands? You now even have Senator Tina Smith from across the Capitol there from you saying ICE and the federal government needs to get out of Minnesota. It's like they want to exist in a state of secession where the federal laws don't apply to people in Minnesota. It's crazy.
Yeah, you hear it. It's like when these nutty left-wing celebrities say, oh, gee whiz, if Trump wins, we're going to move to another country. If you hate America so much, then go move to that other country. And what is that country, by the way? Are they going to move to Moscow because they love Russia so much? They want socialism. They want Marxism. Go to China, where you don't have the same kind of rights you have in the United States of America. But, it seems like every day they want to attack America, attack law enforcement, who are, like you said, carrying out the laws of this land. Democrats had the House, Senate, and White House just 4 years ago. They didn't try to change any of these laws. They opened up the border illegally. They literally ignored existing law. Joe Biden ignored law when he said, come on into America illegally, and millions of people took him up. And it wasn't a lot of great people. It was a lot of criminals, a lot of bad people. You had countries releasing their criminals from jails, and then we had murders shooting up. We had drugs coming into this country. The cartels of Mexico had operational control of America's southern border. Trump got control of all that. And I would argue, by the way, Scott, that's one of the main reasons Donald Trump got elected. Border security was the number one issue. I went all around this country, including traveling with President Trump in some swing states. And everywhere we went, President Trump, number one, he said, I'm going to secure the border. And that got the biggest applause. He said a lot of other things, too, about what he's going to do to reverse the damage Joe Biden did to so many other things, to our economy, rules and regulations, energy prices soaring, housing costs soaring, food costs soaring. All of those things happened under Joe Biden. And by the way, because of Obamacare, you're still seeing skyrocketing health care costs, all because of Democrat left-wing policies. And Donald Trump ran to fix all of it, and he's working on it. There's a lot more work to do, by the way, and everything the Democrats do is obstruct. They vote no on everything. They encourage people to go and attack law enforcement. You're seeing the fraud in Minnesota. We didn't even talk about that. You're talking about Minnesota. Yesterday started with a hearing in Congress with some whistleblowers and state legislators talking about billions of your tax dollars stolen by Somalis and others in Minnesota because the governor of the state, Tim Walz, looked the other way when all this fraud was going on. It was going on for years and years, stealing your hard-earned money. And what is the Democrat response? They want to raise your taxes. The Mandami wing of the party that's running this country now on the Democrat side, that say, hey, everything should be free. Well, of course, they're getting all that money from you. If you work for a living, you're the guy providing the free stuff to the people that want to come here illegally and ignore our laws and attack our law enforcement. It's time for this country to get back to rule of law. Donald Trump was elected to do that. He's carrying that out. Our brave men and women in law enforcement, by the way, are part of doing that job, and they're under attack every day, and it's got to stop.
Congressman, we got about 30 seconds before we need to go to a break. I do want to ask you about the attacks on ICE agents. I know a few months ago there were some legislative proposals floating around to dramatically increase the penalties on people who attack federal law enforcement. Is that still floating around? Is that something we're going to see pop up this year?
There's still bills moving through committees to help give stronger protection to our law enforcement, obviously federal law enforcement officers who have been under attack. One of the things we put in the Working Families Tax Cut, the big, beautiful bill, is a bonus, a $10,000 bonus to our ICE officers who are under attack. We gave a pay raise to our military, our men and women in uniform, who are protecting us from domestic and terrorism threats all around the world. You're seeing that those threats come to America sometimes, but the goal is to keep it out of our country and to go after the bad guys where they are so they don't come here. But it takes a full effort, and I'm glad that the Trump administration has respected law enforcement after years of them being put under attack and, frankly, being targeted as the bad guys by the left wing.
That's Congressman Steve Scalise, the House Majority Floor Leader in Washington, D.C. Congressman, stay with us through the break. When we come back, I want to ask you about what's going to happen next. I know we have a thin majority now because of circumstances, and I know there's an idea about the possibility of a new budget reconciliation process starting. I want to get to that after the break. First, a quick word from our friends at Relief Factor. I have a very simple question. Have you ever been in a bad relationship? Probably have. You settle into it. Deep down, you know, however, I shouldn't be doing this. That's what daily aches and pains feels like. You just get used to it. You say, this is just life now. It does not have to be that way. Take control of your life by trying Relief Factor. You can break up with the pain. We got a letter from a guy named Anthony. He said he was dealing with debilitating pain and fatigue. He gets on Relief Factor for about 2 months, he says. Now I'm back to running my business, fishing, gardening, doing the things that really matter. We're using it in the Jennings household. My parents are using it. They cannot say enough good words about how much better they feel on Relief Factor. 3-week quick start, $19.95. It's a small investment, but a big upside. 1-800-4RELIEF or go to relieffactor.com. More with Congressman Steve Scalise when we come back. It's Common Sense for the American people. Stay with us.
Ready for more common sense? Here's CNN senior political commentator, New York Times best-selling author, and America's favorite political pundit, Scott Jennings.
Welcome back to Common Sense for the American people. Scott Jennings in New York City today. Congressman Steve Scalise, the House Majority Floor Leader, on the line with us. Congressman, thanks for spending some time with us. You guys got a big job right now and a tough one because of the margins. We had an unfortunate passing of one of your members and had a resignation from Marjorie Taylor Greene and other issues. You're down to effectively a one-seat majority. I asked this of the speaker yesterday on the show, and I'll ask you, how are we feeling in the room with the team? Because it's going to require nothing short of perfect teamwork to do what you want to do in the next few months. How are you feeling about keeping everybody together?
Well, a couple of things on that, Scott. Let me first say that Doug LaMalfa, the colleague that we just lost 3 days ago, just a wonderful, wonderful person, great human being. He's congressman from California, came in 2012, and just had the biggest heart. And I love serving with him. And so there is a human side of this. I know we look at numbers and majorities, but Doug was one of the good guys, and we're going to miss him a lot. And in terms of, okay, where do we go from here? You know, I know Doug would want us to keep plowing forward, doing our work. And, you know, I'll give you something that President Trump shared with us. We met with President Trump on Tuesday of this week to talk about the 2026 agenda. And it's a very bold agenda. We're not slowing down. Sure, we have a small majority. We've had a small majority this whole Congress, and yet we've done really, really big things, including the one big, beautiful bill. President Trump said, and I'll quote, "It's not a big majority, but it's a unified majority." And Scott, that's really been the key. Everything that we've done, all the big things we've done for the American people have been Republicans coming together. Sure, we've had differences. You can read about them in the paper. But then we come together and we just get the job done. While Democrats vote no on everything, they voted to raise your taxes. They voted to open the border. You know, you can go see all the things that they've done. We have said we've got to come together if we're going to be able to reverse all the damage that Joe Biden did. If we want to lower inflation, which we're finally starting to do, it's not enough. If we want to lower health care costs, which, by the way, we just passed a bill last month to lower health care costs 11%. It's over in the Senate. Let's get the Senate to move that bill. Every Democrat voted no on that bill, by the way, because they don't want to lower your health care premiums. They want an issue to just go talk about and throw billions of dollars to big health insurance companies, the companies that have record profits, while they raise your premiums. So our answer is lower premiums for families, and we're going to keep working on things like lowering energy costs. We're working on a reconciliation bill. If we can come together there, and again, it's going to be up to us as Republicans, because Democrats have already made it clear they don't want any more pro-growth policies that will result in higher wages for workers or more energy produced, more natural resources. Why should we be getting critical minerals from China and other countries when we can make them all here, but they're shut down because of Biden-era regulations that we want to reverse? It's hard to build things in America. We need more permitting reform. We passed a really good bill out of the House to do that so that people in the northeast part of the country don't have to get their energy from tankers from foreign countries when they can get it from Ohio and Pennsylvania. But because of really stupid policies in states like New York that want to shut down their neighbor's energy supply, everybody's paying more for electricity costs, for example, in those states. How about we lower electricity costs and buy and make more things in America? So we're passing bills to do that through the House. It'd be nice if we had one or two Democrats that would vote on any of this stuff. But we're going to keep delivering, Scott, whatever the majority is.
The House has actually passed some legislation, and I know there's some other things you want to do. We've got about 30 seconds here, Congressman. Is the way forward a budget reconciliation process like the one that you used to deliver the big, beautiful bill last summer?
That's one piece. And again, it requires us to come together on that. there's other bills that we're going to be moving this year as well. We're going to be rooting out more waste, fraud, and abuse. Imagine every time we find $1 billion here and another $10 billion there of your money that's being wasted or stolen, like in Minnesota, that's more money in your pocket. That lowers inflation. That lowers interest rates. So we're going to be working on a lot of different fronts to put more money in the pockets of hardworking taxpayers. Democrats will vote no. I get it. That's what they do. They're socialists. They're Marxists now. But we're going to be fighting for those working families who have been left behind for way too long.
That's Congressman Steve Scalise from the great state of Louisiana. He is the House Majority Floor Leader, and it is his job to keep, along with Speaker Johnson and the rest of the leadership team, it's his job to keep the team together and deliver on the Republican agenda in Congress, and they're doing it with small margins right now, but as he pointed out, they have been passing some legislation. They are working for the American people. Congressman, thanks for joining us. We'll keep up with you in the weeks ahead and look forward to seeing you up in the Capitol very soon. We're going to take a break.
God bless.
Thank you, Congressman. Good to see you, sir. When we come back, I've got Mike Summers here. He's the president and CEO of the American Petroleum Institute. These are the oil companies. They're in the news right now. We'll hear from him when we come back. Common sense for the American people. Stay with us.
Saving Western civilization, one busted leftist narrative at a time. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Common sense for the American people. Thursday, January the 8th. Scott Jennings broadcasting live today from New York City, back in the Big Apple. And tomorrow, I think we're going to be broadcasting from Orlando, Florida. Salem's got a nice set up down there, so we'll see our friends down in Orlando tomorrow. Today, though, in a cold Big Apple, digesting the news of the day, talking mostly about Minnesota today, but I want to talk a little bit about energy, because underlying so much of what's going on in our public policy in Washington and even our international affairs right now is our relationship with energy, what's going on with oil, and so on and so forth. Joining us right now, special guest conversation today with Mike Summers. He's the president and CEO of the American Petroleum Institute. This is the leading trade association of America's oil and natural gas industry, API, we call it around Washington, representing more than 600 companies, advocating for American energy production, dominance, security, and affordability. Mike Summers, welcome into the Scott Jennings Show.
Scott, it's great to be with you.
Thanks for joining us today. And I just want to start with the biggest energy news of the moment, Venezuela. And maybe you did not have this on your bingo card for 2026, but here we are. Venezuela and the president's comments about the oil industry there, what we're doing to, frankly, bring some kind of legitimate government back to that country, and how oil is wrapped up in that. I read in news accounts that most of the top oil executives are meeting with the president Friday in the Oval Office to discuss this. As the head of the American Petroleum Institute, what can you tell us about this right now? I know it's very new. I know we're just days into it, but what's your sort of viewpoint on this American involvement with oil in Venezuela?
Well, look, I think it would help your listeners if we just did a little bit of history here. So most of the United States oil companies, really ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips in particular, the industry basically left the country of Venezuela around the 2007 period. This was when Hugo Chavez really started feeling his oats, really decided that he was going to nationalize all of the oil companies. There was only one company that really remained, and that was Chevron. Chevron is still there, operating in a place called Maracaibo Lake, and they've operated there for over 100 years. But the big resource is in an area of Venezuela called Orinoco Belt. And Orinoco has very heavy oil. It's very difficult to process, but it is the primary place where American companies could really discover a bounty of oil down in Venezuela. But really, the industry left Venezuela in 2007. Think about the place that we were in 2007, where the United States was only producing about 5 million barrels of oil every single day. This was in the very early stages of the fracking revolution. So today, we're producing about 13 million barrels of oil every single day just in the United States. And in addition to that, we've kind of moved on from Venezuela as an industry. There's no investment down there because of the socialist regime in that country. We found other resources offshore in Guyana or in Canada, or, by the way, right here in the United States of America, the Permian Basin in Texas, or the Bakken Shale in North Dakota. We have grown our footprint as an oil and gas superpower. So, as an industry, Venezuela is kind of at the bottom of the list, but the resource potential is enormous. And so, yeah, there, of course, is going to be interest in the country of Venezuela. But you have to remember that this is kind of a backwater right now because of that socialist regime that has done so much damage to the oil industry in that country.
Mike, help our listeners understand something. You refer to this oil as heavy oil. It's hard to process. So if production were to start and you were to get this oil flowing again, where would you process it? And then where would it wind up as part of our economy? This isn't the kind of oil that's going to wind up in your gas tanks, right?
Well, actually, it could. We've replaced a lot of that so-called heavy oil. And when I talk about heavy oil, think of it as tar. It's very, very difficult to process. So that same kind of oil can be found to our northern neighbor in Canada. So we replaced a lot of the oil that we were getting from Venezuela from Canada. So we're getting the so-called Canadian oil sands. So that's a very similar kind of oil. Interestingly, the United States refining industry, those that take the oil and turn it into the products that we use on a daily basis, gasoline, diesel, asphalt, the refineries in the United States are actually tooled to refine the kind of oil that you find in Venezuela and Canada. Why is that? One of the reasons is because we haven't built a refinery in this country since 1977. And when you think about the oil market that we found ourselves in 1977, it was a much different oil market where we were importing most of the oil that we needed in this country. And because of all these crazy environmental regulations, it's very difficult to build a new refinery in this country. So when Venezuela was an oil superpower, we were importing a lot of oil from Venezuela, that heavy oil, because that's what was used in our refineries. But since they turned to socialism, since they turned to this terrible totalitarian regime that was coerced upon the poor Venezuelan people, and remember, they have a great history of democracy in that country, pre-Chavez. We've replaced all of that heavy oil with oil from other places around the world. But if we're going to have energy security going forward here in the Western Hemisphere, of course, Venezuela should play a role. And I compliment the President of the United States of taking care of this issue, because what we saw is that oil didn't go away. It was just the Chinese and the Iranians and the Russians that were operating in our hemisphere. So the fact that the president took this challenge on, and took Maduro out, it could have huge geopolitical consequences for the American people and our country.
Every time I hear the statistic that we haven't built an oil refinery in this country since 1977, it is shocking to me, because the demand for energy since 1977 here and around the world has obviously increased exponentially. Will we be building new refineries in the near future? Is this something that you think is in the offing for the next few years, or are we just kind of stuck with what we got right now?
Well, the truth of the matter is even though we've had a decline in the number of refineries in the United States, the complex refinery kit that we have in the United States is the wonder of the world. The fact that we're able to convert these products into the products that you and I use on a daily basis is truly a miracle. So while we have a declining number of refineries, those refineries have become much more efficient over time. You think about the situation that we were back in 2007, when we were importing all that Venezuelan oil. We're in a completely different marketplace right now. And that's only because of American ingenuity that we've been able to find these resources. The fracking revolution, in my view, was the most important technological change that we've seen in this country in the last 50 years, because it enabled every single other innovation and invention that this country has seen since then. If we weren't an energy superpower, we wouldn't be an economic superpower. And it is exciting that we have these resources at our disposal, and that we need to continue to expand the American energy superpower that we have become. But that also has to include other countries as well. So yeah, American oil companies are interested in investing in Venezuela, but a lot of things have to happen before that happens.
Well, as much as you're interested in Venezuela, you have been investing in America. And that's what I want to talk about next, American energy dominance. Since taking office a year ago, the president has put a real emphasis on U.S. energy leadership. They've lifted these EV mandates. They've restarted LNG permitting. They've opened up more access. And I think they're really, correct me if I'm wrong, engaging with the oil industry and the energy industry in a way that we just haven't seen in the previous administration. Maybe characterize for the audience, Mike, what is it like to work with a new administration compared to what you had to work with under Biden? And is that engagement and is the new attitude in Washington leading directly to American energy dominance in the world?
Absolutely. And let's rewind to the era when Joe Biden was president of the United States, when they had a war on oil and gas. We actually invited the Energy Secretary, Secretary Granholm, to an API board meeting at the very beginning of the Biden term. And one of the things that she said to us is that this industry needed to change, otherwise we would become Kodak. You think about how, what a terrible statement that was, that someone would actually say that to an industry that has been so fundamental to this country's success, the American oil and gas industry, and how dismissive it was, and how naive it was from an energy reality perspective. Fast forward to President Trump's second term, and we actually have an administration that wants to work with this industry to advance an industry to ensure that American consumers have access to oil and gas and lower prices at the pump. And so from day one, this administration has worked with us from the executive orders on day one that ensured that we can operate effectively, to the regulatory reform that they've put in place, to lifting the LNG pause that was put in place by the Biden administration, to allowing us to finally operate again in the Gulf of America and in onshore on federal lands. And then finally, with the completion of the One Big Beautiful Bill that mandated more lease sales in the Gulf of America, mandated lease sales onshore, and finally gave us a tax system that is actually competitive with the rest of the world. It has been a complete and utter sea change. And as a consequence, what you're seeing right now is you're seeing an American oil and gas industry that is thriving and that is producing more oil than any country has in the history of humanity. And that is good news for American consumers and great news for our geopolitical strength.
So gas prices are down. People like that. Maybe approaching $2 or less than $2 a gallon in a number of states. I assume the employment picture for the energy industry, for the petroleum industry, is up. You guys are hiring in a lot of places, yes?
Absolutely. We support about 11 million jobs throughout the United States in every congressional district in the country. And, you know, we also represent about 7% of American GDP. And I like to say, Scott, that that's really the first 7%, because there's no way that we can have a manufacturing base or the kind of industrial base that we have in this country if it were not for the American energy superpower that came as a consequence of American oil and gas.
That voice you're hearing today on the Scott Jennings Show, Mike Summers, he's the head of the American Petroleum Institute. They represent all of the big oil companies and the energy companies, about 600 of them. And Mike, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I actually want to ask you about next week. I know you're having your big annual State of American Energy event. I want to hear about that when we come back. But first, a word from our buddies over at Relief Factor. You know, Relief Factor is doing wonders for thousands of people around the country, including from a man named George. By the way, it's amazing. People get this Relief Factor and they feel compelled to send us letters. I get the letters. I read the letters. Here's George from Oregon. George, by the way, a hardworking guy. He's in a garbage truck. This job was like getting impossible for him because of his knee. He couldn't bend his knee. He tried everything. He gets Relief Factor. Now he says, and I quote from the letter, "I can bend my knee again with very little pain." What does that mean? This man can jump on and off a garbage truck. He can actually do his job. I wonder how many people out there are thinking, boy, my job would be easier if I wasn't in so much pain. If that is you, if you're tired of just living with everyday pain in your job or in your personal life, I encourage you to try the 3-week quick start at Relief Factor. It's $19.95. In a few days, I predict you could be feeling the difference. Go to relieffactor.com or call 1-800-4RELIEF. Be like George. Try something out. It just might change your life. More with Mike Summers from American Petroleum Institute when we come back. Common sense for the American people. Stay with us.
He's the author of the best-selling book, A Revolution of Common Sense. Here's Scott Jennings.
Part of that revolution of common sense was common sense actions taken by the Trump administration to get our energy policy correct in this country. We're talking to Mike Summers, head of the American Petroleum Institute today, about all of that. Mike, thanks for being with us on the show today. You have your annual State of American Energy event next week in Washington, D.C. You're calling this the demand decade. What does that mean, the demand decade? Why is this a defining moment for U.S. energy policy?
Well, you think about the kind of energy that was required when President Trump was president the first time. Energy demand was only going up about 1.5 to 2% a year under President Trump when he was president the first time. We're in a completely different situation now, where energy demand is expected to go up rapidly over the course of the next 15 to 20 years. One estimate says that in the next 15 years, we're going to need 50% more energy than what we use right now just to supply more data centers and to win the war for artificial intelligence with China. So what we're talking about here is that that demand is going to continue to grow in this country. And if this country is going to continue to be the world's superpower, the world energy superpower, we have to invest in the future now. What that means is more pipelines, more development in the United States, and more energy infrastructure to supply the data centers and artificial intelligence that's going to keep this country growing as an economy. So next week on Tuesday, we have our big event, State of American Energy. We've been doing this event for over a decade, where we're going to be outlining our priorities for the future. A lot of it has to do with how do we continue to build the infrastructure that we're going to need to power the future. But we're also going to have industry experts and CEOs from my member companies talking about what's going to be required in 2026. And finally, we're excited to announce that Andy Garcia, who's one of the big characters in the show Landman, is also going to be making an appearance to talk about how that show has really changed the cultural moment that we're in. And we now have a one of these big Hollywood shows highlighting how great it is to work in the American oil and gas industry.
Andy Garcia, now he plays like the narco terrorist who's now helping Billy Bob Thornton and Demi Moore. Okay, well, we'll look forward to hearing from Andy Garcia. I love that show. But let me ask you this. I assume because of this show, people are now walking up to you. And by the way, when I watch it, I see some ads and stuff from API in there. I assume this is like renewing interest in energy companies and oil companies and causing people who didn't know much about it to ask you questions about it. Has Landman had a huge impact on your own PR, both personally and just as an industry?
You know, when we started our partnership with Landman right before the first episode aired in season 1, we were a little bit concerned as to how it was going to portray the industry. But after a couple of episodes, it was clear to us that this was going to be a huge boon to our industry. I don't think that it is changing the cultural moment that we are in. I think it is a reflection of the cultural moment that we are in. This is an industry that actually is very popular with the American people. The American people, because of that big price surge that we saw under President Biden, understand how important American energy dominance is. And we see it in our polling. This is an industry that's more popular than finance. It's more popular than pharma. It's more popular than just about any other industry out there. And we're proud of that. And I think what Landman recognizes, it's a cultural phenomenon, of course, the number one streaming show in America. But it is a reflection of what the American people already knew, that this is an essential industry that is providing energy that this country is going to need for decades and decades to come. And we're proud of our partnership with Landman. And this year's commercials are all about portraying the real industry workers in our industry. So we're portraying real landmen, and we're real people who work in the oil field. And it's an exciting partnership that we have with Taylor Sheridan's most important show right now.
Yeah, I love the way he writes it, and it's fun to watch. We got about 30 seconds left, Mike. Gas prices are low. Production is going well. It's an election year. Can American consumers expect low gas prices throughout 2026?
What they can expect is continued production and continued energy dominance in this country. We are currently producing more oil, more natural gas than we have in any other time in our history and any other country in world history. We're proud of that, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to support the 11 million Americans that work in this industry and consumers that benefit from this industry every single day.
That's Mike Summers, head of the American Petroleum Institute. Support a lot of jobs, support a lot of companies, offshoot companies. There's second, third, and fourth order economic impacts of what we do with energy, and we're making a lot of it right now. And as you said, American energy dominance is very important. And thank you all, Mike, for investing in America. That's all for the Scott Jennings Show today. We'll be live from Orlando tomorrow. See you soon. Common sense for the American people.